I never thought my life would unravel because of a simple phone notification. If someone had told me years ago that a vibrating screen would destroy my marriage and everything I believed about love, I would have laughed. But standing here now, after 7 years of marriage to Sophie, I can say one thing with certainty. Betrayal has a way of sneaking in quietly, like a shadow slipping under a locked door. When I met Sophie, I thought I had found the safest place in the world. She was bright, warm, disarming, in the way she laughed at everything I said. We met at a tiny oceanside cafe in Portwell. I spilled coffee on my shirt, she giggled, and before I knew it, I was buying her pastries just to see her smile again. Back then I believed in the unbreakable strength of the two of us. I believed that love, real love, didn't fade. But illusions are fragile things. 7 years later, I was staring at divorce papers, wondering how someone you share a home, a bed, and a life with could turn into a stranger right beside you. I used to think betrayal was a single event, something dramatic and obvious. I didn't know it was slow, subtle, and razor-sharp. The first signs came quietly. Sophie started staying late at work, but she never brought home tiredness, only her phone. She clutched it the way people hold on to a lifeline. Passwords changed overnight. Notifications came in with code names. She laughed softly at messages long after midnight, turning her back to me, letting the glow of the screen illuminate her smile, one I didn't recognize anymore. I tried to brush it off. I told myself she was stressed, that her job was demanding, that maybe I'd become too paranoid after growing up with parents who trusted no one. But it didn't change the sinking feeling in my stomach every time she angled her phone away from me. Eventually, the signs became impossible to ignore. The encrypted messages, the muted calls she took outside, the girls' nights she left for wearing perfume she hadn't touched in years. Every time she lied, something inside me hollowed out. I became quiet. She became distant. And yet I kept holding on to hope, though the threads of our marriage were clearly fraying. The emotional distance grew into something colder. Conversations turned mechanical, like we were roommates playing parts in a script neither of us believed in anymore. Intimacy became awkward, infrequent, almost forced. She would push my hand away some nights, saying she was tired. Other times, she stared past me like I wasn't there. And then came the cutting remarks. Subtle at first, then sharper. You know, some men really take care of themselves. Maybe you should spend more time at the gym. I guess not everyone can be ambitious. I laughed them off, but inside, each one carved a deeper wound. I didn't realize it then, but Sophie was already gone, emotionally, mentally, and physically. The truth hit like a freight train the day she walked in and told me she needed to confess something. Her face was pale, her voice thin. I braced myself, expecting maybe one affair, maybe a brief lapse in judgment. Instead, she told me she'd been sleeping with multiple men, and she had tested positive for HIV. The air was sucked out of the room, my chest tightened, my ears rang, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Everything that had felt suspicious suddenly formed into a horrifying pattern. Every late-night message, every lie, every secret, it was deliberate, chronic, calculated betrayal. She cried when she told me. But even in her tears, something felt rehearsed, like she had practiced the lines in the mirror. My hands shook as I went to get tested. I sat in the clinic, my heart pounding so violently it felt like it could burst. When the results came back negative, I didn't feel relief. I felt anger so deep it frightened me. But Sophie insisted. She wanted to fix things. She swore she'd change, that she would go to therapy, that she would do anything to save the marriage. I tried to believe her. I wanted to believe her. But the truth was, trust doesn't come back just because someone says, "I'm sorry." And then, weeks later, I found her hidden account. One of the men she had claimed to cut off was right there, chatting with her, late into the night. She had been using a disguised app buried under a fake icon, something desperate and juvenile. And suddenly everything was clear. Therapy wasn't for healing. It was another performance. When I confronted her, she sobbed louder than ever, grabbing my arm, begging me to stay. But all the noise meant nothing. I quietly packed my things while she cried into a pillow, still trying to convince herself she had control over this. 2 weeks later, I filed for divorce. I thought I would feel liberated. I didn't. I felt quiet, empty, like grief had taken a seat on my chest and planned to stay a while. The next morning was the first morning in 7 years that I didn't wake up beside her. The silence was suffocating. No arguments, no accusations, no deception. Just a cold apartment, an untouched bed, and a kind of loneliness I had never felt before. Freedom tasted like ashes. My therapist called it post-separation numbness. I called it survival. Every day became a routine I followed without thinking. Work, home, feed my cat, shower, sleep. Rinse and repeat. My test results were negative, but the emotional wounds were far from healed. Depression disguised itself as productivity. Grief hid in the spaces between moments. Sometimes I tried to create new memories, walks along the pier, journaling, starting new hobbies. But the echoes of what happened always lingered. The memories of Sophie hurt worse than the betrayal itself. But buried inside that pain was something else. Self-discovery. Not forgiveness. Not closure. Just the slow realization that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant learning to live with what couldn't be undone. That's how my story began. But it wasn't just mine. It was also the story of another man, one whose experience would collide with mine in ways I never expected. I didn't expect anyone else to be woven into the chaos of my healing process. After Sophie and I separated, I tried to keep my life as insulated as possible. I avoided social gatherings, ignored invitations, and politely declined every attempt my friends made to help me get back out there. I didn't want to get back out anywhere. I wanted silence, predictability, and distance from anything that resembled emotional risk. But life has its own sense of timing. It started on a quiet Tuesday morning when my coworker, Mira, asked if I wanted to join her for lunch. She had the kind of gentle persistence that made saying no more exhausting than agreeing, so I went. We sat outside near the harbor, eating sandwiches while gulls circled above. I hadn't talked about Sophie to anyone besides my therapist, but something about the calm in Mira's expression made the words loosen. I didn't tell her everything, but I told her enough. She didn't interrupt. She didn't pity me. She simply listened, arms resting on the old wooden table, wind pushing strands of her dark hair across her cheek. "You know," she said softly, "you're not broken. You're hurting. But that's different." It was a small sentence, but it lodged itself somewhere deep in my chest. I didn't realize how starved I was for kindness until that moment. Over the next few weeks, Mira and I developed an easy rhythm. She sat with me during lunch breaks, invited me along for coffee, and sometimes walked with me after work along Portwell Pier. I didn't see her as anything other than a friend. not because she lacked anything, but because I didn't have anything left to give. Then, one chilly evening, she asked if I could help her carry some boxes to her car. When we finished, she lingered beside me, hands stuffed into her coat pockets. "Mira, are you okay?" I asked. She hesitated, then exhaled. A slow, trembling breath. "I haven't told anyone this," she said, staring at the pavement. "But I'm going through something too." Her voice wavered, and for the first time, I saw the cracks behind her usual composure. She told me she had broken up with someone only 3 months before I left Sophie. His name was Adam. They had been together for 2 years. From the outside, people thought they were compatible. In reality, the relationship had eroded over time, chipped away by arguments, jealousy, and emotional withdrawal. "He wasn't a bad person," she said quietly. "He just made me feel small, like I wasn't worth anything unless I was proving myself every second." I nodded, completely understanding more than I wished to. "And when I finally ended it," she added, "he didn't accept it. He kept showing up, kept trying to talk, convince, apologize. I know breakups are messy, but he crossed lines, Evan." "What kind of lines?" She swallowed. "He showed up at my office twice. The second time, security had to escort him out." I felt anger coil inside me, not at her, but for her. I knew what it meant to live with someone who warped your sense of self. It wasn't the same situation, but pain has universal fingerprints. "I'm so sorry," I told her. She smiled faintly. "It's strange, isn't it? How 2 broken paths can cross at exactly the right moment." We stood there, the air cold enough to mist our breaths. And for the first time since Sophie confessed, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope, not attraction, just presence. The awareness of another human being standing close, carrying her own weight of heartbreak. After that conversation, we became closer, but not romantically. It was something quieter, steadier, more fragile. A kind of companionship between 2 people learning how to trust the world again. Healing with someone beside you feels different. It doesn't make the pain disappear, but it changes the texture of it, makes it less sharp, less foreign. But grief is never linear. Just when I thought things were beginning to settle, life threw another wave at me, one I didn't see coming. It started with a notification on my phone, a message from an unknown number, a single line that made my stomach drop. "Do you know what Sophie is doing right now?" At first I thought it was spam. I almost deleted it. But something about the wording, specifically the familiarity with her name, made me freeze. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the delete button. Another message came through. "You deserve to know the truth." A photo followed. My heart thudded painfully as the image loaded. Sophie. Sitting inside a bar I recognized. Harbor's Edge, a place she once claimed she hated. She was leaning into a man I didn't recognize, her hand on his thigh, her smile flirtatious in a way I knew too well. It wasn't the cheating that shocked me. She'd already shown me what she was capable of. What stunned me was the timestamp. It was from last night. The same night she had called me in tears, begging me to give her one more chance. The same night I almost said yes. My vision blurred with anger. I threw the phone onto the couch, pacing across the apartment as my mind raced. Who sent the messages? How did they get my number? Why now? But the questions didn't matter. The truth was clear. Sophie wasn't finished hurting me. Not because she wanted to, but because she didn't care enough to stop. I forced myself to breathe, to steady my trembling hands. I told myself not to react, not to break, not to spiral. And then the phone buzzed again. A third message. If you want proof she hasn't changed, I can show you more. And suddenly I knew this was only the beginning. The third message sat on my screen like a pulsing wound. I didn't respond immediately. My breathing was shallow. My hands were ice cold. I'd thought I was finally pulling myself out of the wreckage Sophie left behind. But now I felt dragged back into it, suffocating under waves I thought I'd already survived. I stared at the number. No name, no profile picture, no clue to who it belonged to. For several seconds I did nothing. Then, against every instinct, I typed back, "Who is this?" The typing bubble appeared almost instantly, as if the sender had been waiting. Someone who knows her. Someone who knows what she's been doing. That didn't narrow things down. Sophie had always been social, always surrounded by people who thought she was charming. Even after the divorce talks began, people took her side. They saw her as the smiling, warm, sympathetic woman who made a mistake. They didn't see what she did behind closed doors. I sat down on the edge of my couch, as though bracing myself. "Why are you sending me this?" I asked. A long pause followed. Too long. I almost regretted reaching out. Then, because you deserve the truth, and because she's hurting more people than you. I didn't know what that meant. But before I could ask, another image came through. This one was worse. Sophie again. This time in someone's apartment. I could see the wall art behind her, a distinctive painting of rolling blue hills. I recognized it. It belonged to a man named Tyler, a neighbor from 2 blocks away who used to come over to help us fix our fence. A man Sophie had once described as harmless. In the photo, Sophie was straddling him on a sofa, her head thrown back, laughing. His hand was pressed against her lower back, pulling her close. It wasn't a candid picture. It looked intentional, almost staged. I felt a surge of nausea so strong I had to stand. This wasn't just infidelity. This was humiliation. Deliberate, reckless humiliation. I didn't know who was taking these photos. I didn't know why they wanted me to see them. But the details were too specific, too real, too close to be fabrications. Before I could steady my breath, the messages continued. She told him, "You were desperate." She said you begged her to come home. She said you'd take her back no matter what. That last one sliced deeper than any image. I had begged. Maybe not in words, but in the silence after our arguments, in the late-night phone calls where she cried and I listened. In the moments I hoped she might still be capable of love, I'd wanted us to work, not out of weakness, out of history, out of the remnants of a life we once promised each other. But seeing these messages, I understood something brutally simple. Sophie didn't just betray me. She built her new identity out of my pain. I forced myself to text back. "Why are you sending this to me?" Another pause. "Because you're the only one she's still lying to. The others already know the truth." A cold stab of dread hit my chest. Others? How many? How long? Before my thoughts spiraled, another message arrived, shorter this time. "I can tell you everything, but you have to meet me." My entire body tensed. Meet them? No, absolutely not. It felt dangerous, manipulative. Whoever this person was, they had already crossed lines by sending me intimate photos. What else were they capable of? I typed quickly. "I'm not meeting anyone. If you want to talk, say it here." Their response came in seconds. I can't. She checks my phone sometimes. She's unpredictable. My heart dropped. Someone close to Sophie? Someone inside her life right now? Someone she trusted. The realization was dizzying. Maybe a friend. Maybe a coworker. Maybe, God forbid, one of the men. Unpredictable. That word echoed in my mind. Sophie had always been unstable in subtle ways. Mood swings, impulsive decisions, emotional theatrics that left me guessing which version of her I'd come home to. But unpredictability to this degree? Enough to scare someone into secrecy? Another message came in. You need to hear what she's planning. It involves you and Mira. I froze. Mira? My chest tightened with fear I hadn't felt in months. I replied instantly. Leave Mira out of this. The bubble appeared again. I wish I could, but Sophie won't. She's furious you've been seeing someone. I typed so fast I barely felt my fingers. We're not together. The reply was calm, almost pitying. That's not how she tells it. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to throw my phone across the room. Sophie was always possessive when it came to attention. Mine especially. Even after everything, she hated the idea of not being the center of someone's world. The thought of her obsessing over Mira made bile rise in my throat. Then the final message of the night came. If you don't meet me, she'll make this much worse. For both of you. And just like that, the screen went dark. No more messages, no more typing bubbles. Nothing. It felt like the breath of a storm right before it hits. Heavy, electric, suffocating. I sat there for nearly an hour, replaying every moment with Sophie. Every sign I'd ignored. Every apology I'd accepted. The photos burned behind my eyelids. Her laughter. Her lies. The way she used my kindness as her alibi. And now, Mira was somehow tangled in it. I couldn't let that happen. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and paced around the room while my thoughts sharpened into something cold and resolute. I wasn't going to let Sophie destroy anyone else. Not me, not Mira, not anyone who stumbled into her orbit. I didn't know who was texting me. I didn't know why they chose me. But I knew one thing, with absolute certainty. If Sophie was planning something, if she was spiraling, if she was dragging others into her chaos, I needed to know. I needed to stop it. Even if it meant walking straight back into the fire I barely escaped. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the darkness pressing against me like a weight I couldn't shake off. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those images again. Sophie laughing in someone else's arms, her face glowing with a freedom she never showed with me. And behind all of that, the messages from the unknown sender pulsed like a warning I couldn't ignore. By sunrise, my mind was made up. I wasn't going to wait for Sophie to make the first move. I wasn't going to let her drag Mira, or whoever else was unlucky enough to be in her life, into her chaos. I needed answers. I needed closure. And most of all, I needed control back. Around 9 in the morning, I received another message from the same unknown number. If you're ready, meet me at the old coffee shop on Carter Street. Noon. Carter Street. Of course, it used to be Sophie's favorite spot. A tiny old-fashioned cafe with wobbly wooden chairs and jazz music that always played too softly. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. I'll be there. My hands were shaking as I typed. By noon, the place was half empty. The warm smell of roasted beans and vanilla filled the air. I took a seat near the window, the same place Sophie and I used to sit when life still felt like something we were building together. Minutes passed, then more minutes. Every time the bell above the door rang, I looked up, hoping to recognize someone. But no one familiar walked in. Finally, after nearly 20 minutes, a woman approached my table. She was in her mid-20s, dressed in a loose gray sweater, hair pulled into a messy bun. She looked nervous, too nervous for a regular cafe meetup. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out the chair across from me. "Are you?" she asked quietly. "I'm Landon," I answered. She nodded, exhaling like she'd held her breath for days. "My name is Avery." The name didn't ring any bells. I didn't recognize her face. She wasn't one of Sophie's old friends. She wasn't a coworker. I was sure of that. So, who was she? Avery didn't wait for me to ask. "I know Sophie," she said. "Too well, actually. I wish I didn't." Her voice cracked on the last sentence. My stomach tightened. "How do you know her?" I asked. She looked down at her hands. "We were seeing the same man." For a moment, I didn't understand. Then it hit me with the force of a collapsing building. Tyler, the man from the photos, the one with the Blue Hill painting on his wall. Avery let out a shaky breath. I found out yesterday. About her. About him. About everything. She paused, gathering herself. He lied to both of us. He said you two were basically done, that she was only with you for financial stability. He said she was leaving you soon. A bitter laugh escaped her. Meanwhile, she was telling him she loved him, and telling others the same. Others. The word echoed like a gunshot. "How many?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Avery hesitated. Then, "At least 4, that I know of." Something inside me went cold and hollow. 4. 4 men, while she was still sleeping in my bed, still promising to try, still crying in therapy about how lost she was. Avery leaned closer. "She told Tyler you were abusive, that you controlled her, that you threatened her when you found out about their relationship." I stiffened at the accusation. "That never happened," I said sharply. "I know," Avery replied softly. "Her stories contradict each other. I think she lies so much, she can't keep track anymore." I rubbed my eyes, trying to process the avalanche of truth. "And Mira?" I finally asked. "Why did you say she was involved?" Avery's expression darkened. "Because Sophie found out about her 2 weeks ago. Tyler told her, bragged actually, that you were seeing someone new." She swallowed hard. Sophie didn't take it well. Understatement of the year. Avery continued, her voice dropping lower. "She told Tyler she was going to make sure Landon never forgot her, and that if she couldn't have your attention, no one else would." A sickening chill crawled up my spine. "What does that mean?" I asked. Avery looked terrified to say it. "I think she's been following you. And Mira. I think she already knows where Mira lives." My heartbeat went wild. "No," I whispered. "No, she wouldn't." But then I remembered the unpredictable rage, the impulsive behavior, the lies layered so deeply she drowned in them. Avery interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "There's more." Of course there was. "She told Tyler she wasn't worried about consequences because she still had you wrapped around her finger. She said you'd never let her fall. And if she did something drastic, she'd find a way to blame you for it." My blood ran cold. Everything Sophie had done flashed through my mind at once. The betrayals, the manipulation, the emotional whiplash, the gaslighting, the fabricated stories. And now, the possibility, that she might be planning something reckless, something dangerous, something meant to pull me back into her gravity. I suddenly realized why the messages felt desperate, why the sender wanted me to know, why Avery looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Sophie is unraveling," Avery whispered, "and I'm scared of what she'll do next." I sat back, breath shaky. "So what do we do?" I asked. Avery looked relieved that I said we. "I already went to the police," she said. "I told them everything I knew. They said they can't intervene unless something actually happens. But they logged my statement. Of course they couldn't help until it was too late." "We need a restraining order," I said quietly. "Both of us. And Mira, too." Avery nodded quickly. "I'll help you. Whatever you need." For a moment, we just sat there, two strangers connected by the same disaster, the same woman, the same storm. Then my phone vibrated. A new message. From Sophie. My blood iced over. "I saw you today. Why are you meeting her?" I looked at the timestamp. It was sent 3 minutes ago. My eyes darted to the window. Across the street, tucked behind a bus stop, stood a figure I recognized instantly. Black coat, messy blonde hair, hands clenched at her sides. Sophie, watching me, watching us. Avery saw my expression and followed my gaze. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh God," she whispered. "Landon, she's been here the whole time." Something in me snapped. Not fear, not sadness, not even anger, just certainty. I stood up slowly, pulling out my phone, my voice low but steady. "This ends today." Avery rose beside me, trembling but determined. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I looked her in the eyes. "I'm going to take back my life." For the first time in months, the world felt sharp, clear, focused. Sophie wanted chaos. She wanted control. She wanted to make sure I never forgot her. Fine, but it would be the last time she ever touched my peace. I walked toward the door, toward the street, toward the woman who had tried so hard to break me. And with every step, I felt something I never thought I'd feel again. Freedom, not as a distant hope, but as a choice I was finally ready to make.